You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, CEO of the MacBeth Group in Edmonton, and author of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. Welcome to the show, Hilliard.
Nice to be back on your show, Jim.
CMHC has made some shocking predictions, or perhaps predications that other people aren't so shocked about where we have high-risk real estate and where we have low-risk real estate. Maybe you could outline that study for us.
Well, the study came out. It's a quarterly supplement that they do, and prior to this one, they had been saying that there really was no bubble in housing. They might have made some minor claim, but now they've changed. So now they're saying that they're in a couple of markets, or three markets at least, there's a high risk of a housing correction. And, Regina and Winnipeg, I don't think people really care too much about, other than the people that live there, I guess, but Toronto is a big deal. So they're saying that Toronto is at high risk of a correction, and that's a big deal. That's a big change. But the good news for Vancouver is, although they do suggest that prices are extremely high in Vancouver, everybody knows that, they say it's a low risk for a correction in Vancouver.
Now, why have they made that prediction?
The one in Toronto is about overbuilding. So they've basically got four things that they look at: overheating, acceleration in the growth of house prices, overvaluation, and overbuilding. And so all of the markets pretty much have elevated house prices, as I found in my research. But the CMHC doesn't get worried about high prices unless there's a rapid increase in prices or signs of overbuilding. So almost all markets in Canada that they look at have an overvaluation in housing, but the thing that's tipped Toronto over the edge is overbuilding and in a rapid acceleration in house prices. Now, Vancouver's also had a rapid acceleration in house prices, so both Toronto and Vancouver are in the same boat there. I think everybody saw the numbers that came out recently. They're phenomenal gains, like 8% year over year or something like that for single-family homes. But the difference between Toronto and Vancouver is there's been overbuilding in Toronto, especially in the condo segment, and not so much in Vancouver.
I heard something like 70,000 new units on the line in Toronto.
It's unbelievable. And a lot of them are empty, actually, and as a lot of them are empty in Vancouver, as you know, but the worry in Toronto is that who's going to buy all these units? It's, the single family homes, there haven't been the pace of building in that segment, but in the condo segment, it's really amazing. And I compared Canada to the US, and Canada's been producing at almost twice the rate as the US has. Of course, the US was depressed because they had that bubble, and then the bubble burst, and they had a depression in house building. But Canada just kept going along, and we're building almost at about 50% more today than their annual rate in the U.S. But not that long ago, it was double the rate in the U.S. But a lot of that was in condos, and a lot of that was in Toronto. There's the equivalent of 20 or 30 buildings under construction in Toronto with more than 200 units each, and that's a lot of. There has to be a lot of people that don't already own a home that want to buy those condos, or at least to rent them.
What effect has the economic downturn in China going to have on the real estate market in Canada, especially Vancouver?
So there's two opinions about that, and it's a great question. So the one opinion is that with the downturn in the economy in China, and then the latest news in the last few days is the devaluation of the yuan, that means that people coming from China would have less money to spend on Vancouver real estate. This is a scary thought. So that would be, on the surface of it, the initial reaction. But there's a second reaction, and that is the wealthy people, and I think mostly the people that are buying in Vancouver are really only just the very wealthy Chinese people. They might be in a bigger hurry to get their money out of China if they see that the currency is declining and also the economy is slowing down. So there might be initially, maybe that's what we've been seeing the last few months in Vancouver with the big price gains. There's an even greater urgency, but then eventually the thing will slow down because of the economy. It's really odd to me that the most expensive housing market in the whole world, Vancouver, is reliant on a country that is relatively poor. China's only got an average income per person of $5,000. In Canada, it's roughly $50,000. In the U.S., a little bit higher at $55,000. These are rough numbers. So we're relying on a country that's only makes 1/10 the income that we make to support our most expensive housing market. It's crazy.
But on the other hand, if you're a billionaire and your currency is devalued 2 to 10%, your 10 billion now becomes 9 billion. You're still a billionaire.
Yes, and if you've got this money and maybe you don't really want to explain to the authorities where you actually got it from, and you want to get some of it out of China, because there is a crackdown on corruption coming underway in China. It's been undergoing for a couple of years now. Then there's maybe an urgency to get the money out. But one of the indications that maybe that's slowing down is the gambling casinos in Macau, and that's been a traditional route for people to get their money out of China. And the volumes, a couple of the owners of the casinos in Macau are actually U.S. companies, Las Vegas Sands and another one, Wynn Resorts, I think. And their numbers are way, way down in Macau. The volumes are way down. And I think it's because the people that would normally go to those casino things are either a little bit poor and they don't want to gamble, or maybe they're a little bit worried about being seen to be wealthy, and maybe they're trying to be a little bit less conspicuous.
Although the BC Lottery Corporation recently upped its table limit to $100,000 a bet, and that business is booming for them. So, like I said, for the rich, there is no such thing as a recession.
No, it's true. Although, the other thing about BC real estate is that we tend to concentrate on China, but having worked in Alberta for more than 40 years, I know that an awful lot of wealthy oil people from Alberta bought BC real estate, and whether it be in Kelowna, Victoria, or Vancouver. And there's been some dramatic changes even in the last few days here in Alberta in terms of the wealth, or the shrinking wealth of Alberta. Everybody's sort of heard about the oil price going down, and it's gone down. The WTI, the West Texas Intermediate, which is the benchmark in North America, has dropped 31%. To $42 a barrel, which is a new 6-year low in the oil price. But the price we get in Alberta for our heavy oil, the bitumen, which is most of the oil is produced now, is the heavy oil, whether it be from oil sands or from northern Alberta, near Cold Lake and Bonnyville. It's dropped 58%. So the price, this is hard to believe. This number's hard to believe. It's a shocking number. Is under $20 a barrel. It's $19.80 US we're getting for oil now in Alberta. And part of that is the cost of transportation, and part of it is the lack of transportation. So we can't get the oil out of Alberta, and it's building up into a glut, and of course so the price is plummeting. Well,
it doesn't help that nobody wants you to build pipelines out of Alberta.
No, the best chance for a pipeline, as I understand it, there's basically 3 big proposals. There's the Northern Gateway, which seems to have no chance whatsoever of getting approval. There's the Energy East pipeline that goes all the way down to New Brunswick, which is running into a lot of opposition in Quebec, and may not even make any sense economically because it's very expensive. I think it's $12 billion is the latest number. So neither of those seem to be likely to happen anytime soon. But there is an existing pipeline, which used to be called the Trans Mountain Pipeline, that goes to Vancouver, and it's now Kinder Morgan is the owner, and they would like to triple the volume going through that pipeline, and that already exists, so they don't have to go through any untouched land, and they just have to increase the size of it and the volume, the capacity of it, and that one has the best chance. So that would be a very, very good thing for Alberta if that could get approved. But I understand the problem with that is, of course, the terminal is right there in the harbor, in Cole Harbor, and there would be some big tankers going in and out of there. There are tankers going in and out of there now, but there would be a much bigger number of tankers going in and out of there.
Yeah, instead of a tanker a week, it's a couple of tankers a day, something like that.
Yeah, and they got to go under that nice bridge and go past the British properties and all that. Maybe it ruins the view for those people. I don't know.
Well, they certainly wouldn't want the beaches on Stanley Park to get messed up.
No, I think it would be very. I really don't know what the answer is. It's extremely distressing, and people in Alberta tend to be optimistic and tend to be risk takers, and up until recently, I think people generally have had the view that we'll get through this. We've been through this before, we'll get through this. But lately, the last couple of weeks, I've detected that people are starting to get quite worried because, well, numbers like $19.80 are, our economy is just not built on numbers like that. Our economy is built on numbers like $50 and $60 and $70, not $19.80.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
Welcome back. We're speaking to Hilliard MacBeth, CEO of the MacBeth Group in Edmonton and author of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. I think with the latest news from the CMHC, your sales of the book will start going up again.
I hope so. I was noticing the sales are steady, but the excitement has kind of died down a little bit, and but I do get emails almost every day from people that have read the book. And one of the things that I thought I was doing when I wrote that book is helping people to diversify their assets, because I detected an over enthusiasm when it comes to real estate, but it's actually working out to be a little bit different from that. I'm getting emails from people in Vancouver and Toronto and all over Canada that said they were thinking about buying a property. They're young people, and something about it just bothered them, paying that really high price for that property. But everybody around them was saying, "You have to get in now. You have to get in now." And then the book came along, and the book says it's okay just to rent for a while longer and save up a bigger down payment, and you don't have to buy. And those people are loving the book for that reason, because everybody around them was telling them exactly the opposite. But their instinct was telling them that it's crazy to chase really high prices in a bubble. So they had the right instinct, but they didn't have any support until my book came along.
How is the new Premier of Alberta, the NDP's Rachel Notley, doing?
Well, she's been really quiet. The whole government is been very quiet, and there are a couple of things. One thing that came out since we last talked that is starting to heat up, but they have made very few big moves, very few controversial moves. But the one thing I noticed this week, which is new, is there's a contract. The previous government, going back to Ralph Klein, felt that the private sector was the way to go, and if you could get the government out of anything, it would be better. So they kept sending everything to the private sector. Anything that they could privatize, they privatized. And one of the things that was coming up for privatization was the laboratory services for Alberta. And there's a contract that was being awarded to an Australian company, and it's a very large contract. It's billions of dollars for all the lab services in, I don't know if it's Edmonton and Calgary, but a very large amount of people. There's 1,100 employees affected in Edmonton alone, for example. And the NDP have put that on hold. They're looking at it as possibly maybe it would be better to keep that within the government. And of course, the government, all of the employees in the lab sector in the government are unionized. And of course, this Australian company coming in, probably most of the employees are not unionized. So the unions have got involved. And, of course, the unions are expecting that the NDP government is going to help them, because they weren't getting any help before with the Conservative government. So there's a lot of expectations from the union sector, and the NDP are going to have to walk a very narrow tightrope to avoid getting into trouble, either on the one side with the unions or on the other side with the private sector.
Well, I know the federal NDP in the federal election is against the Alberta oil sands. Maybe not on the sense of jobs, but they certainly want to crack down on environmental rules and so on. Has Rachel said anything about that?
Not as far as I know, although I haven't, I must admit, I've been following the federal election more closely, and I haven't paid as much attention to Alberta. And I think the Alberta NDP have tried as hard as they can to stay out of the federal election, but they did get involved to one degree, because Harper criticized it was quite a harsh criticism of the NDP government, and in my mind, kind of unwarranted, I think, in the sense that they said that the NDP government's been a disaster since they got elected. Well, they've only been elected for a few months, and of course, before that was a progressive conservative government for more than 40 years. So he was kind of blaming all the troubles in Alberta on the last 3 months, ignoring the previous 40 years. So Rachel Notley and the local government reacted quite strongly to that, and so maybe, And I don't know what Harper's strategy is if he's trying to draw the Alberta NDP into the federal election. I don't really know, but they shot back with some pretty harsh words against the federal Conservatives. So,
well, it is very hard to find out what their strategy is because the Prime Minister only allows Conservative Party members into his rallies. And here in Vancouver, where a reporter asked him about the legalization of marijuana, that reporter was kicked out. So it's pretty hard to find out what he's up to if he won't answer questions.
It's amazing that somebody could run in an election but then not take questions from the media. It's going to be a long, I guess, what is it? We still have 9 weeks left or something. It's going to be a very long time. And I don't think anybody's going to be left everybody's, by the end of this thing, everybody's going to have some wounds. And some people are going to have some pretty major wounds, I suspect. And it's still, in my, from what I can tell, I'm not an expert at all, but I'm just my own opinion is I think it's still up in the air as to what's going to happen. It could go any number of ways.
But I think the one thing everybody agrees with, no matter who the ads are from, Justin Trudeau does have nice hair.
I was thinking that, I don't know. That thought came into my mind. He's got very nice hair. So,
well, actually, some women I've talked to, that's what they tell me. And I said, what does he stand for when it comes to foreign policy or domestic job development? And they say, but he has nice hair. If that's what the election comes down to, that kind of shows you how maybe Canadian values have changed over the years. Of course, his dad was bald and he still was considered a sexy guy, so you don't maybe even need hair.
Yeah, you need that. I forget what this dad had. It was an image of a canoe in the Nahanni River or something like that. Just one of those, like Vladimir Putin with his shirt off riding a horse or something. That's all you need. You don't need anything more than that. You don't need policies or you just need that photo image
Well, it's worked for Putin so far.
Yes.
The Russian people love that kind of stuff.
Apparently.
Maybe Canadians are backwooders, but I haven't. And another thing I have noticed too is on Facebook, a lot of selfies with Justin Trudeau. I haven't seen any selfies with Stephen Harper, the Right Honourable, or with Thomas Mulcair.
As a result of this, the publication, I've gotten quite a bit of interaction on the Twitter and LinkedIn and the media and the social media, and so I've been watching it quite closely. And the Harper Conservatives are very, very absent from the game. The NDP under Mulcair, they have a lot of people, and Trudeau and the Liberals have a lot of people very active on social media. But the Conservatives, I don't know if it's a strategy or if they just don't have the people that know how to do it, but they're definitely losing the social media battle for sure.
Well, the more than 24 new ridings made in Canada are in the middle of former Conservative ridings. Maybe they're counting on that.
Well, they say, they always talk about the undecided vote, but really, a lot of people, they vote the same way time after time, so there aren't as really that many people changing their mind, but this might be the one exception when the results are really up in the air, and it becomes a question of who gets their vote out, who gets the people riled up enough, because really it's still only, 60% of the people in a good year would actually make it out to the poll. So if you can get if the support is split equally, a third, and you could increase your voter turnout by even 5 or 10%. That could be enough to win the election.
In BC, that's the way it's always been, is that you have your solid NDP base and you have your solid, I call it SoCred light now, but right side base, and the difference is that 5% swing vote.
Yeah, and it's not really people changing their minds, it's just whether you get them out to vote or not. Like whether they stay home on election day or whether they actually make it out to the polls. If it's a couple, do both people make it out to the polls? Or if there's a 19-year-old who are notorious for not voting, if one of the people can get those 19-year-olds out to vote, then and that would probably favor the NDP or the Liberals more than the Conservatives. Then they can sway the election.
Well, good luck getting them away from their mobile devices and iPads and.
Well, if you could vote on your mobile device rather than having to go to the poll, and that's probably coming at some point, then the turnout would jump dramatically. In Australia, they have a 99% turnout.
Well, that's because it's the law. It's against the law not to vote. You get fined.
Make it against the law. I don't know how that works for them, but the 99% turnout.
Well, that's why they get that 99%. I don't know. The fine isn't all that big, but how many people want to pay $60 to $100 for not voting? Much easier to cross the X.
Exactly.
And also, I think you'd have a much fairer result.
Well, the other thing that's up in the federal election is this issue of moving to proportional voting, as in Europe, where if like the Green Party and Elizabeth May gets 10% of the vote, they get 10% of the seats in the Parliament. And I don't know, that would be a big change, but that is one of the things that's up in the air. Apparently, some of the people running are promising to bring that in if they get elected.
Yes, and they tried to do something like that here in BC, but they said it was too complicated. And I said, well, the ruling party is going to keep the same system that got them into power. Why would they want to change?
Exactly. I mean, there's no way that if somebody's been in power for a long time, they're going to want any kind of change in the method of voting. But you sort of, I don't know, it seems maybe like that's something that probably will eventually come along, and that'll have a big impact. And then you get into coalitions, and there's even talk about coalitions in the results of this federal election. But we've had very few coalitions over the years. We've had minority governments, and occasionally the opposition. I remember the Joe Clark government got defeated on a vote of confidence because the coalition fell apart. And I think it was Bob Ray in the opposition that introduced the non-confidence motion that carried. But it's very rare. It's very rare in Canada. So that would be an exciting result to have it, the balance of power being held by the Liberals or something like that. I don't know.
Hilliard, thank you very much for chatting with us.
Nice to talk to you again, Jim.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, author of the best-selling book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's the CEO of the MacBeth Group in Edmonton. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. You can forward comments to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.